So basically covered the whole surface just to be sure. I was listening to a YouTube video while I did it, so it was quite therapeutic. So yeah, there we go. We've got all our masking tape on. We've taped off up to the edges that we need, so all good. In the cockpit there, just put a little bit of sponge in. You can do that with any sponge, whatever you can lay your hands on, packing sponge. I tend to like to use the dishwashing sponges because they're quite soft and easy to manipulate, whereas packing sponge can sometimes be a little harder. So yeah, we're ready to paint that, and the method will be to paint the fuselage first, and then I've got options. I can either stick it onto some blue tack for doing the wings and the tail and what have you, or I can use a crocodile clip on the exhausts there, which will also hold it perfectly well. So the limitation obviously of this is that we've got to have painted all that first, and there's a bit of a risk we could damage the paint, but we are ready to put our next paint on, so let's do that. Right then, let's prepare our paint for spraying. So we are going to take the lid off. Well, my first thing I'm going to say is don't shake your tin first, because what that does is it gets lots and lots of paint on the lid, and then all of that paint immediately runs down into the rim of your lid, and then when you come up put it back on, that drips into, and that's what makes all that paint build up, and then you can't get your lid on properly. So don't shake your paint, but you do need to stir your paint, and there's nothing better than giving it a good electric stir. I think I need new batteries in this. Right, I'm giving it a manual stir first, just to get the bits off the bottom and scrape it about a little bit. As you can see, it's a full tin because it's a new tin. So let's get the lid back on there to avoid any accidents. And then once you've put the lid back on the paint, just turn it upside down, make sure it's sealed. Just make sure if you haven't pushed it down properly and there's a slight air gap, that will fill it and seal your paint. Of course, making sure you push the lid down is the main thing. Now you can use white spirit for thinning enamel paint. I've got Humbrol enamel thinners, so I'm going to use those. They're really good thinners, and you can use them for painting your brush as well if you want to. So tip a pet with some of that in. Before I put that in, I nearly forgot actually. I want to put some of this in, Slow-Mo Extender Medium. It's by VMS, and it's specifically designed to slow the drying time of enamel paints, which I know sounds a little odd because they're notorious for the long drying time, but you can still get tip dry, because what's happening is the same as acrylics. As the air is passing through, it is drying the surface of the paint, so you can get a little bit of tip dry. In fact, what I will do is I'll have a little bit of white spirit in a palette with a brush, so I can clean the needle if I need to. But it does just help a little bit, so a little tip there. So has a nice little dispensing nozzle. So I've put a couple of drops of that in as my start to thinning this down, and it's just like adding flow improver to an acrylic paint. It's part of your thinning liquids. So you can see that's still really quite thick. So I don't really have ratios with enamel paints. It's thin it till it's thin enough is my basic rule. Now some people will tell you that it should be the consistency of milk, but I don't know whether they drink whole milk or skimmed milk, so that's not really helpful to me. So I prefer to use the free running method. So I wipe the brush on the side of the palette, and the speed of how it gets to the bottom is my gauge of whether it's thin enough, and this isn't at the minute. See, it instantly goes down, there's no resistance. So for me, that's about right. I could go a little thinner. In fact, I might do. That's feeling good now. Okay, thinning paint. I know everyone looks for a scientific solution. It's a ratio of and so on. At the end of the day, it's down to experience. Paints vary, even acrylic paints vary in viscosity. Even the same paint colour from the same manufacturer can vary in viscosity. So I tend not to worry about it too much. Right, let's get the airline on and the compressor on. Okay, trying a new angle because of how I set my paint booth up. It's been difficult with the overhead, so I'm trying a different angle for this. I'm about ready to go. I am going to have to put my mask on, so that's the end of me talking. So I'm going to switch you off and then switch you back on again, and when I switch you back on again, I'll have paint in the airbrush and be ready to go. Well, I wish I'd put a different primer down because it was really hard to see that grey against the grey primer. But I think that is all done. As you can see, I had no issues with the spraying. I didn't get any tip dry or anything like that. The paint's gone down really well. I haven't had problems with pooling or anything like that, so I'm happy. Gonna let that just dry off now, and I'm gonna go and clean my brush. And by the time I've cleaned my brush, I won't be that long away from being able to put the green down. I will leave it a bit longer, just to be cautious. And there are some areas where I've put it down a little bit heavier, like on the tail here. I can see it's a little damp, but that will be dry enough to overspray with the green in about half an hour. But like I say, I might leave it a bit longer, clean my brush and get some breakfast. Okay, we're about 45 minutes since we put down the grey paint. I've just been having a look at it and I did manage to cover everything, so it's all looking good. By no means is it dry, but it is dry enough to put the green camouflage down, and then we can leave it for a good length of time. So that is the next job, the Humbrol 30, which is a green colour, and gonna do that freehand so we don't have to mask it. The paint is simply not ready for masking, but we can go over this with our green paint freehand and it'll accept it fine. So let's do that. So my process will be exactly the same in terms of prepping the paint and putting the paint down. The only difference is it'll take me a lot longer. I need to be a lot closer to what I'm doing, so I need to just move my paint booth a little bit so I can get in a bit closer. And yeah, because we're doing detail painting, I will see if I can film any of it, but if not, we'll just take some photographs and I'll perhaps talk you through them. But I can explain my process when I'm freehand painting camouflage. Let me just move that out of the way and show you the camouflage pattern. So this is what Airfix wants us to do with their starter set Spitfire. So what I will basically do is work from the center and then move out to form the pattern. That way the edge of my spray pattern coming out of the airbrush, I can eyeball to make the shapes. So again, here you'd start in the center, move out. That's a hard edge, so that's okay. And then just gradually form those side edges. And it's camouflage, so if it doesn't quite get the right shape, who's gonna know? Okay, so that is the plan. Get the green down. Let's see how we get on. Well, there's our finished article. The Humbrol 30 went down really nice. Sprayed lovely. Yeah, I was able to get a really nice camouflage pattern, and I'm really happy with how that has come out. It's not perfect, but it gives you a good idea of how easy it is to put enamels through your airbrush. So like I say, the grey paint wasn't dry enough for masking, so that's why we did it freehand. If we'd left it 8-12 hours, we could have masked it and done it that way. But for speed of getting this build through and onto the channel, I've gone freehand. So we'll leave that to dry for a bit now before we take off the masking from underneath. And then we've got some detail painting to do, and we've got our pilot to finish. So yeah, happy with that. It's gone down well, and then we can get this all put together, and then we can think about some weathering. Right, while the paint is drying on our Spitfire, we can come back to our pilot. We've painted his overalls in Humbrol 96. So we've done his skin. I used a Vallejo paint for that because I didn't have a Humbrol, but if we were doing it in the Humbrol enamels, it would be Humbrol 61. So the next thing is to do the life preserver. and we're using Humbrol 81 for that. So I'm going to mix the paint and then we'll put some of that down. So we also have our canopy to paint, and the lines for the framework are actually quite well raised, so it should be easy enough to go in and paint that without having to worry too much about masking and the like. So I'm going to use this 10x0 brush, and hopefully that'll do the trick. We need to remove that ejector pin first, and probably we'll get rid of some of this sprue just so we can get in better. So due to the pattern of the camouflage, we can paint the whole of the canopy in the Humbrol 30 green. So I'm going to start that process, and hopefully we can get some of that on camera for you. Let's improve the light. Okay. With a little bit of care, we should be able to not have any cleanup. Now, one thing we can do is paint the underside of the plastic. Now, this part actually doesn't get glued in, it clips in. And just painting in this edge just helps with the glass look of the clear part. Okay, that's looking okay. You can see it's drying fairly quickly. If, like me, you've been a little heavy-handed and you need to clean the glazing up a little bit, before the enamel paint has fully hardened, you can just go in with a cocktail stick and take back anything that might be where you don't want it. And on this starter kit, that's nice and easy to do because you've got very well defined areas where the paint should be. So we can see there, and I can just take that back. Like so. Tidy up that edge. So it's about half an hour since we put our green paint down, just over an hour since we put our grey paint down, and that is now dry enough for me to handle. So for me, that's not much different than an acrylic paint. So we can now take the masking tape off. If we wanted to, we could start painting the exhausts and stuff. What I want to do is let this dry for several hours and harden before we put a gloss varnish down, ready for the decals. There we go, we can see the masking's worked okay, so happy with that. So we'll just put this to one side and let it fully dry for a few hours, then we can gloss varnish it. What I want to do is make sure all the moisture is flashed out of the paint before I put the varnish down. Right, time to put our decals on. We've got 14 decals to put on in total. And I've given this one coat of gloss varnish. I've used this VMS gloss. It tells you that you can airbrush it or use an ordinary paintbrush for it, but I've done both and it works fine in the airbrush. I'm not a big fan of it on the brush. It tends to bubble quite a bit compared to other glosses that I've got, and yeah, it doesn't go down as well. So personally, I would avoid using it with the paintbrush, but you know, that's just me. But it's giving us a nice hard acrylic covering onto our enamel paints, so we can put down our decals now, and then we can decide what top coat we want to put over that. Then we can do the last of the detail painting, put the palette in the canopy, and then think about some weathering. Okay, so let's get on with the decals. Decals are on, and as always you seem to need to put your decals over a lump. So I've just gone round all the panel lines with a knife and just highlighted those by dragging a knife across them, and then we're going to put some microsalt in to help them sit. I got a couple of air bubbles as a result of the lumps and bumps, but in the main they've sat down really quite well. I can't see that I've got any silvering anywhere. I thought I might on the sides, but I don't appear to have. So all of the decals are going to get some microsol now, and then going to leave it for a few hours just to dry off and settle down, and we'll come back and take a look at that. So I'm going to do that, and I'll get back to you when that's all settled. Okay, while my decals are still drying off, although they do seem to be sitting down quite well now. Whilst they're drying off, that allows us to do some detail painting. So we've got tyres to do, we've got the exhausts to do. Tyres, I'm going to use tyre black, so it'll be an occasion where we're using acrylic because I've only got it in acrylic and you can't get it in humble enamels. We've also got the helmet to do on our pilot and his straps and things, and I think the next thing we're going to do is the aluminium for the wheel and wheel hubs and the like. So let's crack on. So whilst I've got the aluminium paint out, I'm going to use the opportunity to do some chipping. I'm using, what's this, a 10x0 brush to put some chipping in, and I'm just painting it in. So around any panels that are used a lot or anywhere, you might get a little bit in the walkways and things like that. So just going to go around and do that. We still have got quite a lot to do with this. I got a couple of bubbles in the varnish, for example, so we need to polish the surfaces, do another gloss coat and stuff, but that's not going to prevent me from putting some first chipping down. We can always come back and put some more in if we feel we need to. Okay, matte 28, that is my last colour for the pilot, so we can do his seat harnesses there, and then we'll just give him a little bit of a wash just to bring out the details a little bit, and then he's ready to go. Now I'm also going to use this for around the top of the boots. It should be white really, but when he's sat in this cockpit you're hardly going to see it, so it's just going to save me a bit of time. Canopy has just clipped into place. Let me show you that. That looks pretty good, I think. You can see the pilot in there quite clearly, and this just clips out. So I've not put the wash on the palette yet. We'll do that at some point when we've got the right colour out for the aircraft. Right, okay, so last thing to go on is the propeller, which just fits in there like so. So let's get that glued on as well. Just a little bit of glue at the base there, just a drop on each one. That'll be plenty. There we go. And that is our build done. And you could leave it at this point and go, right, yep, done. And that looks perfectly good. It's a nice display piece, looks great on your desk at work or on your bedroom shelf or wherever. I think that's a lovely kit in its own right. But I want to see how much further we can take this. So, time for a bit of weathering, and to do that we need to give the whole thing another clear coat to key the decals in to the paintwork, and we're going to do another gloss varnish for that. We're going to use Humbrol Clear Gloss Varnish for this. It's if you've not used it, it's clear, water-soluble, self-leveling varnish. You can airbrush it straight from the bottle. You can brush it straight from the bottle. And actually, I think it's the best product. I've tried lots of products, and that's the best as an all-rounder. So yeah, that's what we're going to use. We're going to give everything a coat of that, including the canopy, and that will seal everything in. Obviously, we'll do a matte varnish after, later on when we've done panel washes and the like. Right then, our gloss coat is now dry. It's actually been left overnight, and I'm happy that that is doing exactly what I want. My decals all look painted on and they've settled really quite well, so I'm happy with them. They all look good. So we're now ready to start the weathering process. We're going to start with a panel line wash, and the product that I'm using for this is this MIG panel line wash. It's called Natural Brown. I think PLW means panel line wash natural brown, which is MIG product 1614. It's a bit thick and sludgy for what I'm looking for, so I'm just going to thin it down with some MIG thinners. I'm not going to thin it down a lot, to be fair. Just put a couple of drops in, and we'll give it a good stir. I don't tend to paint it all on and then wipe it all off. I know a lot of people do that, and we could do that. I tend to want to go around the panels and what have you. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use a thinner brush, so I need to clean this, and just put it where I want it, and then go back and tidy that up afterwards. It does take longer. I don't know, I just don't like the idea of slapping on all of that stuff all over my model. And the skeptic in me wonders if that's the recommended practice by the manufacturers, because you use a lot more product doing it that way, and they're in the job of selling product, so they need you to use as much as you can, as often as you can. Okay, so I'm going to use a fine detailing brush to go around the panels with this, so let's get stuck in, see if I can get you a bit closer. Let's see how we get on. So I'm going to start on one of the wings. And we're just following the panel lines. We're not being particularly careful. We're just painting it over, making sure that we're getting it nicely down into all of those panel lines. Do it methodically so we don't miss anything. And we can also do it where there's any joins, or like these bubbles in the wings, we can go around the base of those, which will leave a little bit of a witness when we clean it up. Now I have already done some chipping, and what that will do is where we've got some chipping and there's a recess, this wash will just sit in there when we take it off, and it'll just darken that, so it'll look like older chipping, or at least that's the plan. And then we can put some fresher chipping and different effects on the top as we wish. Go around the base. We've got some detail on there where it's sort of raised and then what have you, and we can just go around any detail. It'll just help highlight that. Okay, so that's my first wing done. Perhaps should have done it on the underside where it's easier to see. So let's Let's just do that and give you an idea. Just making sure it's all gone into any recesses. We're not trying to be particularly tidy, like I say, because we'll clean it up anyway, and we've got all sorts of different weathering effects we want to put over this anyway. There you go. You get the idea. So I'm going to carry on and do that, and I'll come back to you when it's ready for cleanup. So our wash is now dry, and that allows me, it's been left about an hour, that allows me now to tidy this up. I'm going to show you on this side because it's easier to see what's happening. And basically I'm going to go in with a bit of tissue paper, and we're just going to rub away, and all that's going to do is take that wash off the top surfaces, leaving it behind. And then where we've got raised detail, it'll just leave a little bit where the tissue doesn't get in. So we're not pressing very hard, we're just rubbing it on the top and wiping most of it off. But you can see what's happening. It's coming off really easily because we've gloss varnished. So it's not really sort of sticking at this stage, and it's just staying there in all those crevices that the tissue can't get it out of. Now, if you don't like it or you want to change it a little bit thinner, give it a wash over with a brush and wipe it away. You can easily get rid of it. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. So just wiping it off and bringing out the detail. If you've got any stubborn marks that you want to get rid of, that the tissue paper's not getting rid of, you can always use a little bit of thinner on a brush, but you should find that it's not really a problem. So next job is to do some more chipping, and this time rather than using a brush, I'm going to use a cocktail stick that I'm going to sharpen to a fine point so that I can put tiny dots and scratches on. So let's get started. So I'm going to use MIG metal aluminium for this. The thought process being that as it's an acrylic, any thinners we put down when we do the streaking aren't going to affect it, so it'll behave in the same way as the acrylic varnishes. So it should be protected. Okay, so you can see where we've previously done a little bit of chipping, and the wash has gone over that and what have you, and that's dulled down a little bit now. Plus we use the Umbro enamel, which is a fairly dull aluminium anyway. So this is a brighter aluminium, and hopefully will just give us a bit of a contrast. So off we go. carry on with this and come back to you when we're ready for the next step. Next thing I want to do is just look at this little track here. So this groove is where the canopy slides back. So I'm just taking an ordinary HB propelling pencil and running it up and down that groove a little bit. Just metallizes it and gives it an impression that it's been used. There we go, that's all there is to that, and that just adds another dimension to that little bit. So even though there's a wash in there and stuff, that little bit of pencil mark does make a difference. Okay, time to do some more weathering on here. We've got lots to do. There's lots that I think I want to do on this. Really annoyingly, I have managed to break the antenna, and it's been glued on 3 times and it's come off again, and this time I don't know where it is. I have looked everywhere. Now, if it turns up again, it's going to go back on. Otherwise, we might have to scratch build one or something. I don't know, but it's really annoying. Anyway, on with the show. We have a number of areas like the exhaust outlets and the air intake and what have you that need to be blackened up a bit. So I'm just using a Posca paint pen for that. It's quick, it's easy, and it gives you the control you need. So the plan is to go in with a paint pen and do that. It's also fairly quick drying, the paint pen, so that's helpful as well. Okay, we mustn't forget the propeller in this, and we're just going to do some glances, and that's going to give an impression of the airflow. And because we've sealed this with the varnish, if we don't like the effect, we can simply rub it out. And we can do a little bit of chipping around the bottom of the spinner. Okay, time to do a bit of streaking. So we've got the ammo streaking brushes there, and we're going to put a little bit of thinners in there, so we can manipulate them around as we want. And we're going to start on the underside, and in the center here it gets quite heavy, and I want something that looks fairly dark, not dark green. So I'm thinking that which is warm dirty grey. So I'm going to start the process by doing some spotting on there, but I need to put this in a jig, so let's do that first. Right then, let's start with our warm dirty grey. And what we're going to do is we're just going to spot it like so. We can also do some spots in other places. Tried to be random. And in the first instance, what I'm going to do is, while they're still just drying, is just with a clean brush, there's no thinners on this. You can see it's quite a rough brush. Just going to simply drag that back a little bit. Start that streaking process. Not sure I wanted it there really. So we're just gently going in the direction of the airflow. Okay, now we're going to moisten the brush in the thinners. I don't want too much thinners on there because too much and you're simply going to take off what you've just put on, which actually would be handy at this point here. So put some there and just clean that up. I'm taking all the thinners I can off the brush now, but there is still thinners on there, and you'll see we can drag that back and make the effect look a little bit more natural. Now this is just random, but we have got some more specific areas that we need to streak, but we'll come to that in a minute or two. Okay, so in this centre it gets really quite dirty, and I'm going to go with, this is grime next, for this centre area. Now I want this to be much heavier now. So let's start with that, see how we get on. Clean it in the thinners. It doesn't matter if the thinners gets dirty because, well, we're adding grime and dirt in the process anyway. So I'm just going to let that dry for a minute. And what we can do is we can do some spotting with some other colours in that process now. So this is green grey grime, quite dark. And we talked about doing some specific streaking, and I'm going to put that behind each one of these ammunition blasts. Let them dry for a sec and we can come back to this now. Now, it's a little bit too heavy at the back there, so we're just going to take that out with a bit of thinner. There we go. feather it in a little bit. There we go, that's looking a bit more natural now. I'll just... And now we can do these at the back. I'm going to take a smaller brush where I can do a more controlled cleanup. And we can just narrow that down a little bit. And get rid of some of this at the top. I want a pale grey, so this is cold dirty grey, and then we've got streaking dust. I'm going to use that to try and put a little bit of colour changes into some of these areas. So we'll start with this grey. What I'm trying to do is just going to try and change the evenness of the colour. There we go, I'm happy with that. Now what we can do, while we've got some thinner in the palette, is we can put some of this streaking brusher in there. And what I want to do is make a very little, it's almost a filter, but more of a wash. And we're going to get the propeller now, and we're just going to mucky that up a little bit. Just using that dirty thinners. Okay, time to get out my pastels. I always like to remind myself what I've got in here. Don't need those. Oil stain will be handy, so we might use that. I don't really need the others either, so they can stay there. There's my various weathering brushes and applicators, so let's just think what we need. We're doing exhaust staining, so that'll be good for that. We are doing some there we go, that's a nice one for the gun barrel cordite staining. So old brushes, always handy to keep them for weathering projects. Okay, I'm going to start the process actually with the oil stain. So this is basically Tamiya eyeshadow, and what we're going to do is using the sponge end. This is the applicator that came with it, but it's basically like a makeup sponge. You rub it onto the product there, and then we're just going to use that underneath to add some of this oil stain in. Particularly around the back. There we go, that looks better. So happy with that now. So we can put that to one side. So the next thing I want to tackle is cordite staining. So we're going to use the narrowest of brushes for that. Let me just put my magnifying glasses on. And all we're going to do is rub the brush onto the pastel. And then gently streak it back from the openings in the wings. And what happens is it slowly builds up, and you just keep doing it till you get the effect that you want. Do it underneath as well. Easier to see the effect underneath actually. You can see it's quite subtle, but it wasn't. Sometimes you see great big streaks the full width of the wing, and that's not right, I don't think. Okay, we're also going to do this black on these openings as well. Okay, and then we can move on to doing the cannons on this side. There we go. So whilst we've got this very dark, it's almost black, but it's really a very, very dark grey. But whilst we've got that out, we can use it just to darken some areas on the model, so around some of the panel lines. which just further highlights the panel lines a little bit. Okay, that'll do for that stage. So we want to think about the exhaust staining now, just a little bit. So I'm going to put down this sort of rusty, oily, dark browny colour first. I think we need to change our brush for something bit wider. Okay, that gives me a base and a track. And what I'm probably going to do is mix some of this now. So I'm going to take a knife and we'll put some of this and just scrape it and turn it into a powder. Going to add a little bit of this paler brown, just a tiny amount. Then we're going to add some of this very dark grey. Then what we can do is mix that. Gives us a real sooty, oily, dirty, grimy looking effect. And we can just put that then behind the exhaust. And on those, because obviously we've got exhaust passing over the top of those. There you go, not too heavy, which is sort of what I want. If you want to go heavier, you can just grind it in a little bit. I suppose we should balance that out. Now then, they were quite famous for sort of quite a pale streak, so I'm just going to put a little bit of a lighter colour right down the middle there. Okay, that I think is looking good. I'm just going to polish up the canopy. Right, I'm going to tidy this up and then we're on the last little bit. Okay, we're ready to permanently mount this on its stand. So we're going to put a little bit of glue right on the top here. And get our lovely Spitfire. There we go, and then we've got our propeller to put on, and we need to do a better job of gluing this really than last time, given that it fell off. So there we have it, Airfix starter set Spitfire, finished, painted in enamels, weathered in enamels, amongst other things. What I set out to do when we did this build was to show you how to airbrush with enamels primarily, but also I think there is a fear that if you've used enamels to paint, it's difficult to weather it because you weather with enamels, and I wanted to show you that it's not. As long as you put an acrylic clear coat down, you can then put your oils back on top. It's not a problem. So there we have it, it's done. Haven't found the top of that, which is really annoying, because I wanted to just put a little bit of aerial cable on, but when I clean my desk, I'm sure I'm going to find it. In the meantime, I'm going to take some photographs of it, and a big thank you for joining. I hope that was useful, especially if you've been umming and ahhing about acrylics, about enamels, sorry. Don't be scared of enamels. Don't be scared of airbrushing enamels. Enamel paints is a really good paint system. And if you're considering lacquers, then enamels are just like lacquers, but a bit less whiffy. So hopefully I've shown you that it's quite easy, or maybe even easier to use enamel paints than acrylic paints. Okay, that was a lot of fun. The starter set from Airfix comes with a stand. I think it looks fantastic. I think they've done a really good job. It looks just like a Spitfire. It's very detailed for something that builds up with a low part count. And yeah, you can see that if you're an accomplished modeler, you can get just as much fun out of a starter set as someone who's new to the hobby. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for looking in. I will see you again soon. You enjoy your modelling, and take care.